Hello, I'm Dr. Louise, and this is Dr. Louise Thinks, a channel dedicated to helping people connect with the healing power of philosophy. As we've been exploring the philosophy of friendship, a question has been lurking in the background since our very first video. It came up particularly strongly in last week's video where we explored the possibility of friends with benefits, but it has been tucked into almost every nook and cranny of every video we've explored since we started the topic. And that question is exploring the difference between romantic love and friendship love. Now, this question is particularly interesting because it hits on issues in philosophy of friendship, obviously, but it also touches on topics in the philosophy of love, and as we're going to see, in the philosophy of emotions. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a tour through some major ideas in these different subfields of philosophy. But all the while, we're going to stay laser focused on our key question, which is what is the difference between romantic love and friendship love? Our tour is going to be facilitated by a philosopher named Berit Brogaard in his article, Friendship Love and Romantic Love, in Routledge Handbook of Philosophy of Friendship. Now, this piece covers a lot of interesting ideas, a lot more than I could fit into this particular episode. So if you're interested in learning more, you can grab the link to the handbook in the description, but there's also going to be a link where you can grab my notes from the chapter. My notes are in like a cartoonish style, so you can grab a lot of core ideas very quickly by glancing at them. You'll be asked to give me your email and you'll hop onto my newsletter, and then those notes will be delivered right to your inbox. Now, for today, we are going to be exploring the differences between romantic love and friendship love. And we're going to start that by asking an obvious but very difficult to answer question: what is love? Now, there are a lot of different schools of thought on this topic, and we don't have time to go through all of them, but we're going to focus in on a pretty intuitive answer to the question, and that is that love is an emotion. J. David Velleman presents a particularly interesting account of the idea that love is an emotion. His strategy is to say that love is an emotion in the way that a very familiar emotion is to those who study contemporary analytic philosophy, and that is Kantian respect. So he's going to draw a parallel between love and Kantian respect. Now, Kantian there might be a little bit, what's that? That's referring to Immanuel Kant. He's a very famous philosopher in the Western canon, and Kantian respect is like Immanuel Kant's take on respect. So we're going to be touching a little bit on Kant here. So Kantian respect is the respect that every person is owed in virtue of their inherent worth or their dignity. Velleman argues that love is like Kantian respect insofar as love is importantly directed towards an individual's dignity. So Velleman paints this picture of how love works, where when we love someone, our emotion is directed toward our beloved, right? That's the person we're thinking about. The perceived cause of that emotion are like the specific properties we're thinking about them. So maybe like the way that they talk or the way that they walk. And then the thing that is common for all of the situations in our lives where we love someone is that the focus of that love is on the person's dignity. So Kantian respect and love are both focused on a person's dignity. However, there are some key differences that Velleman wants to point out between the experience of feeling Kantian respect for someone and feeling love for someone. So Kantian respect is something that we grasp intellectually. We use our mind to recognize that because of this person's dignity, we ought to have respect for them. This respect is focused on the person's dignity, but it turns out we can't have like a direct experience of someone's dignity. That's a fact about them that we have to reflect on to notice. So because we don't have that direct experience, that's why we have to kind of use our mind in order to connect with their dignity and thus generate the feeling of respect. Now, love is pretty different than this. It's important for Velleman that love is an embodied emotion. It's something we experience in our physical being. And the reason that's happening in this case is because love is a direct response to the qualities of that person, right? Remember I mentioned before, some of those qualities might be like the way the person talks or the way the person walks, right? We can have direct experience of those things. So as a result, we can have an embodied experience of love. This direct lived experience is very different than the kind of intellectual stuff we have to do with Kantian respect. Now, an important difference between Kantian respect and love is that they have different motivational forces. So like a motivational force is like when you have a desire to do something, right? So like I feel this way and it's making me want to blah, 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 right? That's a motivational force. So what's happening when we have Kantian respect for someone, we are generally motivated to treat that person in a way that respects that they are an end in themselves. So we're resistant to using people as a mere means when we have Kantian respect for that. So the motivational force of Kantian respect is to treat the person as an end in themselves. Now, this is very different than the motivational force love has. When we feel love for someone, according to Velleman, we're motivated to lower our emotional defenses and thus become more vulnerable to the other person. So the thing that we desire to do when we love someone is to kind of let down our guard and allow ourselves to be more open to this person. So Velleman's arguing that love is like Kantian respect insofar as they're both focused on dignity, but they're very different in terms of both their experience, like the lived experience, and also it's very different in terms of the way we're motivated when we have that emotion. This is a really interesting take on the idea that love is an emotion, but it does have some challenges. Most importantly, when we're thinking about our question today, what's the difference between romantic love and friendship love? This account doesn't seem to give us a lot of resources, right? For Velleman, it's all love insofar as it's directed towards the person's dignity. It's a little tricky here to figure out how we would carve the differences that we usually feel between romantic love and friendship love. A natural way to characterize the differences between romantic and friendship love is that they're kind of focused on different things. We're going to talk more about this in a minute, but traditionally romantic love is more connected to sexual activity and friendship is not. But on Velleman's account, we cannot carve the world like that, right? Both of these emotions are directed towards the person's dignity. And that's really like all Velleman's account gives us to help understand the differences. In addition, we kind of have a challenge on Velleman's account when we're thinking about the motivational forces of love, right? His view is that all love motivates us to disarm our emotional defenses and make ourselves vulnerable to the other person. It's not clear, though, how we could, in a more nuanced way, explain how that's working in a romantic context versus a friendship context, right? It's all like, on this view, love just kind of becomes one homogenous thing. And for us in our question, oh, that's a problem. We need more what I would call philosophical machinery to help us understand not just what love is by itself, but understand like the different flavors of love. So for these reasons and a few more that I couldn't get in the scope of this video, Brogard goes ahead and says, okay, Velleman had some good stuff here, like this is the right direction to go, but it's time for something new. And so naturally, as philosophers do, Brogard's like, I got a different account. I got an account that has all the stuff we liked about Velleman's account, and it has the machinery we need to understand the differences between friendship love and romantic love. Brogard has named his account the perceived response theory. So Brogard claims that love is a complex emotion. And he gives us a definition of what love is. It's a perceived body and mental response to the beloved as depicted and appraised in perception, memory, or imagination. Okay, so that's kind of a technical definition. It might not be obvious what it means. So let's look at an example. Let's talk about someone who has a fear of public speaking. Now, this person might be reflecting on or engaged in the topic of public speaking in some way, and they might be experiencing some of the emotion of fear, right? Now, this is a complex emotion for Brogard because we have the kind of primitive version of fear, like that's our really basic, like run from the tiger kind of fear. This is a more sophisticated take on that where we've brought in elements from like public speaking, and it's a more complicated situation, right? Now, it's important for Brogard's account that the person who has this fear of public speaking, they might be actively perceiving like the audience that they are speaking to. They might be remembering a past situation where they had to give a public speech, or they might be imagining a totally new scenario where they're up on stage and they're about to talk. Right, so that's the part of his definition where it's perceived, it's in memory, or it's imagined, right? So this person is reflecting in some way or experiencing public speaking. In this case, the person who is afraid of giving a public speech is actually perceiving that experience as fearsome. And that perception, in turn, elicits a like body response, right? They're physically experiencing fear. So that might be they start sweating or they have an elevated heart rate, any of those physiological cues that you are feeling afraid. So whether it's an active perception, a memory, or something in the imagination, this person has created a body and mental response to the act of public speaking. This is how Brogard understands the fear of public speaking, and it will help us understand how he understands love as well. In fact, for Brogard, this is his account for how to understand all complex emotions. The fear of public speaking is a complex emotion. Love is also a complex emotion. So for love, Brogard argues that love is a complex emotion, which on his account means that it is a perceived bodily and mental response to the beloved as depicted and appraised in perception, memory, or imagination. In other words, when we experience love, this emotion renders this person in question as lovable or worthy of love. So rather than dignity being the focus of love, on Brogard's account, lovability is the focus of love. Right? So we borrowed from Velleman. There is a focus to it. Velleman says that focus is dignity. Brogard says, no, that focus is lovability. Okay, so that might seem obvious to you, right? Like the focus of love is lovability, rocket science, right? But it does, in fact, have some important implications when it comes to our question of the difference between romantic love and friendship love. According to Brogard, whether an individual determines that these particular qualities make a person lovable is actually going to depend on several different things, and that's going to help shape our answer to is it romance or is it friendship love. So one factor that's going to make a big difference is the role that this person is playing in our lives. So for romantic love, we are appraising and perceiving that individual as lovable in their role as our romantic partner, or maybe potential romantic partner. For friendship love, we are also doing the same appraising and perception to see the individual as lovable in their role as our friend. So I might appraise and perceive Fred as lovable in his role as my romantic partner because he has broad shoulders. Let's say I like broad shoulders. I do, in fact, like broad shoulders. It's not exclusive, but I do like that. So for me, that means that Fred is lovable as my romantic partner in part because of his broad shoulders. I perceive his shoulders as a thing that makes him lovable. Now, for me, Fred's shoulders would not be relevant in him being lovable as my friend, right? For me, my friend's body shapes don't have as high an impact. It's not like a reason to love them. It is maybe some facts about them, but for me and the way I relate to romantic partners and friendship partners, physical attributes are not going to be a reason to think my friend is lovable as my friend. So a natural thing to wonder here is, how do we come to believe that someone is lovable in those particular roles in our lives? Brogard argues that the answer to that question for love, like any complex emotion, is a combination of biology, cultural scripts, and individual scripts. The biology is relevant insofar as love is a perceived body response to the beloved. So there is a physiological component, whether that be for romantic love or friendship love or other complex emotions. Like, biology always has a role to play, even if that role is different depending on which complex emotion and which flavor of that emotion we're considering. So the other part of this were these two different scripts, the cultural and individual script. So Brogard helps us understand what he means by scripts. He says that they are structures comprising social roles, common knowledge, and norms and guidelines that shape our perceptions, our thinking, our actions, and also how we interact with other people. So scripts are kind of like the default way that we learn to approach different situations in our lives. It's a script we have been handed, that we have learned. Now, it turns out we all live in a particular culture, which provides us with specific kinds of scripts. Brogard argues that these are just cultural constructs. These scripts are not saying something necessarily true about like the depths of reality. It just turns out we live in this society, we have this culture, and because of that, our culture hands us these kind of made up scripts that are supposed to help us navigate the world. Now, our individual scripts are much more tailored to us. These are based more on specific things about our personal history, so like how we're socialized. It's going to be the details on how we've been brought up. It's going to be based on our lived experiences since we were young. It's all of this stuff kind of in our personal lives. Through all of those experiences, we also kind of have these scripts that, depending on your view, we have more or less agency over these scripts, but again, it's something we've kind of learned based on experience for how to navigate the world. Now, in contemporary Western society, the cultural script we've been handed is that romantic love usually equates having some kind of sexual relationship, whereas friendship love does not. That is a cultural script that, if you're from the West, is something that you are operating with. So according to that script, if you want to know if it's a case of romantic love, you got to start asking questions about the sexual relationship there. Those tend to collapse in our default cultural script of romance in the West. So another way to say this is, if we're thinking about motivational forces, right? When we have romantic love, one of the motivating factors there is going to be this sexual desire, right? That is going to be the motivational force for romantic love if we're leaning primarily on the dominant cultural script we've all been handed here in the West. Similarly, the motivational force of friendship love is not going to be about sexual desire. Now, Brogard doesn't really say what the motivational force of friendship love is. This is a frustrating thing. So far, my experience of the literature here, we're doing a lot of work to say details about what romantic love are, but we're kind of like not filling in the blank on friendship love. I don't totally know why that's happening in the literature, but Brogard it's normal in this space where he's just like, well, I don't know, friendship's just like not sex. So that's super satisfying. Now, we can see that there's a lot of opportunity here for tension between the cultural scripts we've all kind of been handed and our individual scripts. This becomes especially apparent if we consider folks who are asexual. So these are often people who relate to sexual desire in a way that is often challenging to the dominant script we've been handed in the West when it comes to romantic love. Folks who are asexual often fall in romantic love and friendship love and do not experience sexual desire. It's not the case that all people who are asexual do not experience sexual desire. For example, demisexual folk do experience sexual desire, but it has to be after what we might ordinarily kind of call a friendship connection. There's a lot we could say about that, but in general, for asexual folks, romantic relationships and sexual relationships pull apart. Some asexual people want to have romantic relationships, but they do not want to have sexual relationships. Some asexual people do not want either of these. There's a lot of opportunities for differentiation when it comes to folks who are asexual. And that shows us that the dominant cultural script is not necessarily capturing what people actually experience or how they're relating first to these ideas of romantic love and friendship love. So we have all of these scripts in addition to our biology that are going to have an important impact on whatever qualities we're finding lovable in our beloveds. These are all important if we want to answer for ourselves the question of friendship love versus romantic love. We can see here it's going to be kind of more tricky to give like very broad definitions that are true for all of us. We share a certain culture in the West, so we can kind of talk about that. But your individual script is going to importantly shape how you perceive someone as lovable. And that's an area you're going to have to explore for yourself in a way that like we can't hear in this, kind of speaking for all sort of YouTube space. So that means Brogaard's account leaves us with kind of this interesting project where if we want to figure out the differences between romantic love and friendship love, we're going to need to get real specific and start exploring our own scripts for these things, and also probably get a little bit more familiar with our biology, our physiology, to understand the cues our bodies are giving us in these different contexts. So I'm sure for some of us, the main way we're going to relate to romantic love is through the dominant cultural script in the West. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is a script that we've been handed. And I think kind of by default, that ends up shaping a lot of our thinking. In that case, most likely the things that you see as lovable in your romantic partners are going to be the physical attributes, things like broad shoulders, whatever physical attributes you find aesthetically pleasing or sexually pleasing. But if you're relying more on your individual script, it may not be about sexual stuff at all. It may not be about physical stuff at all. You may have completely different criteria because your individual script is, got all the variety of your entire lived experience as a person here and as somebody who was raised in a particular family setting. That's true for how you're thinking about romantic love, but it's also going to be true for friendship love. And I think our script in the West on friendship is kind of underdeveloped, and that's one reason it's a little bit harder to fill in the blanks on what friendship love is. We kind of have a rule for what romantic love looks like. It's sexual. Like that's our rule of thumb. When it comes to friendship, it's not as clear what our rule of thumb is. Like we haven't been given as strong a script. So my instinct is that for the way we're going to understand friendship love, we're going to be leaning more on our individual scripts, which is going to be much more influenced, right, by your personal history, maybe your experiences with friends in the past, maybe your experiences with friends in your family, right? That kind of stuff I think has a bigger role to play when we're unpacking friendship love. So I really want to hear from you. What do you think makes someone lovable for you in a romantic way or maybe in a friendship way? How do you think the two are different? Like, are you more like Velleman where you think like, I don't know, like all love is kind of oriented in one direction and the differences don't matter as much? Are you more like Brogard that thinks like our cultural and individual scripts really have a lot to say in how we're understanding this stuff? I'd love to hear your opinions. Put them in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this adventure through practical philosophy, be sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And until next time, stay curious, be thoughtful, and keep asking those questions. Bye-bye.